Hi, my name is Sydney Austin. I'm going to walk you through the Spanish lesson plan I've created with Miss Rayetta Austin. I've named this Spanish lesson as the Spanish WebQuest because it's similar to the WebQuest assignment that we completed earlier in the semester where we created steps for the students to follow on a Google site. The initial problem Miss Austin addressed to me was that she wanted her students to have access to material outside of the classroom. She liked the ideas that I suggested when I suggested sites like Quizlet, Clip, and Google Sites as potential mediums for her students to access Spanish practice material outside of the classroom from their mobile devices. So here I have the curriculum alignments, both the targeted Common Core curriculum alignment or standard and the Empowered Learner or NET-S standard. There's more standards that this lesson plan can access, but these are the main two we wanted to focus on. We really want the students to be able to exchange information through dialogue in writing about familiar topics, and we really wanted the students to be able to collaborate by seeking feedback that informs and improves their practice to demonstrate their learning in a variety of ways. And later on, I'll show you how we implement this. So this lesson plan is targeted for grades primarily 10th and 11th. This can really be targeted to any high school student taking second language classes, but for her specific students, they're in 10th and 11th grade, and the age tackled is 15 to 17 years old. So now I'm going to tell you about the primary tools we plan on using for this lesson plan. Like I said before, the first one is going to be Google Sites, and this is going to serve as a main online hub for the links that her students can access from any device that has internet access. Next is going to be Quizlet. This is one that Miss Austin was especially interested in because it gives her students the opportunity to practice Spanish vocabulary words that she created and access them at home and in the classroom. And the final main tool we'll be using for this lesson plan is Clip for the students to create a podcast later completely in Spanish using the new learned vocabulary. This is one that I suggested because I thought it would really tackle the standard, the Common Core standard for the students to exchange information in a different language. And I thought this would be a very great tool to utilize that idea. The other tools we have for this lesson plan are going to be for assessment and grading. So the first one's going to be Google Forms. It's going to be used to test the Quizlet study guide to make sure the students have studied and memorized the new vocabulary Miss Austin has set out for them to learn. And the next one's going to be Google Docs. And we're going to actually create two separate Google Docs with different purposes, but it will serve as an assessment tool toward the end of the lesson when the students write responses. So now I'll walk you through the step-by-step idea for this lesson plan for students to complete. So the first step is going to be to study the Spanish vocabulary Quizlet that Miss Austin will create and provide a link to on the Google Sites hub. Each flashcard will be assigned a word that must be used later in the student's assignment, as well as different forms each word can take if applicable to the word. I thought that if Miss Austin wanted to use this lesson plan again, she can alter it to use conjugation instead of vocabulary, or Spanish grammar structures as well. She liked the idea of the students having access to online flashcards. That was one thing she was especially excited for because all they have now are just individual ones that are easy to lose. And she really liked the idea of them being able to for her to create flashcards for them and they can access them with any device that has access to the internet. Step 2 is going to be the quiz. Like I said before, the quiz's primary purpose is going to assess the student's learning on the Quizlet. Step 3 will be creating a podcast using the website Clip. And what Clip is going to do is it's also going to be its own assessment tool in a way, but it's also going to give the students a opportunity to use the new vocabulary they learned and put it to practice. The next step the students will have after creating the podcast is that they will have to provide their name and a link, which is what this will mean here. They'll have to provide their name and the link to their created podcast. And after that, each student must listen to one other student's podcast and later write a response on it. So we don't have any strict length requirements for the podcast. The main requirement is going to be that each student list one comment on what the student did right or how the student utilized the new vocabulary effectively, and 2 areas the student can improve upon. This will be in a separate Google Doc for the students to just write a short response to each student to that will be easy to access. We went with Google Docs for this because seeing as how we're using a Google platform like Sites for the hub, we figured this was the easiest way to incorporate writing. And other than the requirements of the comments to be made, there are no other specific requirements. The response can be written in English just to ensure clarity, seeing as how these are second year Spanish students rather than third or fourth. So now we'll get into the assessment process. The first assessment tool is going to be the Google form. And this will make sure that the students are familiar with the learned vocabulary, like I mentioned, and it can also highlight any areas the students are failing to understand, or if Ms. Austin needs to modify the Quizlets or address any specific problems her students are having. Next is the podcast. And the podcast, like I said, will serve as their own assessment tool because they show how deeply the students understand the new vocabulary and how skilled they are at using it. Because it's not a quiz, Ms. Austin will have to listen to each podcast individually and assess the utility of each learned vocabulary word. Finally is the responses, and by having each student critique each other, this opens an opportunity for each student to see what can be improved and what is being done correctly. I forgot to mention before that the podcast is to tackle the Common Core standard for students to exchange information effectively. This response is going to tackle the NET standard or the Empowered Learning Standard for students to collaborate with each other and respond to each other. The assessment process for the responses is going to be Ms. Austin going in and reading each one and grading each one individually and making sure each student provided the correct content for each response. That's the lesson plan I've created with Ms. Austin. Thank you for watching and have a good day.